Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week. Bernie, AOC, Mamdani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing.
If you've ever watched the Democratic Party flirt a little too hard with socialism, this feels like that moment when your friend screams, "Don't text your ex," and you do it anyway. Bill Maher just dropped another tirade, this time aimed squarely at AOC, Bernie Sanders, and Zoran Mamdani. And he's not mildly annoyed, he's running a full-scale political intervention. Maher, a Democrat since practically the Stone Age, now sounds like the designated driver, watching his friends pound tequila shots at 2A.M. He's looking at AOC and her rising socialist protege Zoran Mamdani, begging, "Stop. For the love of political survival, just stop." Of course, they're not listening. They're doubling down. AOC recently fired back at critics, Maher included, with the classic get-to-know-him defense. You know the line, "Just meet the guy. He's great once you're in the room." It's political Tinder, swipe right on socialism and see what happens. Here's the twist. AOC preaches open-mindedness and face-to-face dialogue, yet she rarely offers the same courtesy to Donald Trump or most conservatives. Suddenly she's the champion of listening, which is either ironic or a masterclass in selective empathy. Even moderates in her own party are raising eyebrows so high they're nearly in orbit.
What do you say to the skeptics, though, in the party who want to keep him at arm's distance, some who have some problems with him, even some fellow New Yorkers in the swing districts outside the city?
Get to know him. Get to know him. You know, this is not about having any kind of hard line. I think that if anybody is skeptical, I would say get to know him. And once you get into a room with him, kick the tires yourself and make your own assessment instead of just kind of making assessments from what you may see on television. If you have the ability to meet someone in person, you should meet him before you judge.
And Maher, he's not holding back. He rolls out one of his go-to comparisons: capitalist South Korea versus socialist North Korea seen at night from space. One side glows like Times Square. The other looks like an entire country forgot to pay its electric bill. Then he pivots to Venezuela, once wealthier than Poland in 1990, until Poland embraced capitalism and Venezuela doubled down on 21st century socialism, which, spoiler alert, turned out to be the old-school version. Shortages, inflation, economic collapse, mass exodus, basically the greatest hits of failed economic experiments. Maher's message is simple. New York is not a magical exception. Socialism doesn't suddenly work because you live in a coastal metropolis. Try to reinvent the wheel, he warns, and don't be shocked if it runs you over. But Zoran Mamdani isn't selling free unicorns. He's young, charismatic, high energy, pitching policies that historically tend to sink economies. And Maher, instead of applauding the enthusiasm, scans the Democratic Party like, "Hello, anyone else seeing this? Are we sleepwalking into 2028 with blindfolds on?" AOC says, critics should just meet Monk. Maher fires back that they should meet history, and history, as he loves to point out, has never lost when it comes to socialism failing spectacularly. Then, Maher zeroes in on Bernie Sanders. Bernie's decades-long crusade has been single-payer health care for all 340 million Americans. But when his own backyard, tie-dye-loving, maple syrup-soaked Vermont, tried it for just 626,000 people, it collapsed faster than, well, the recent Oval Office debacle. The takeaway is brutal. If Vermont couldn't make it work, why would anyone believe New York can?
I know the kids think that stuff that happened before their appearance on the planet didn't really happen, but it did. We've run this experiment many times, and the results are always obvious. Here's capitalist South Korea at night from space. Here's socialist North Korea. Yeah. In 1990, Venezuela was wealthier than Poland. But then Poland, finally free of Soviet-style economics, went all in on capitalism. And now their economy is as big as Japan. And people there have high wages, low inflation, cars, vacations, homes.
Maher keeps driving the point home. Bernie Sanders, AOC, and Zoran Mamdani aren't really Democrats. They're democratic socialists, a totally different species. And they'll tell you that themselves. No shame, no spin, no apologies.
Meanwhile, Venezuela traded capitalism for Hugo Chavez's socialism for the 21st century, which turned out to be like socialism in the last century or any century, a mess. It turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening.
The problem, Maher argues, is that most voters don't even notice the branding confusion. But his hardest-hitting line cuts deeper. The very politicians trashing capitalism owe their fame and their platforms to the system they love to attack. Bernie's best-selling books, AOC's brand deals, their massive social media reach, and public influence. None of that exists under real socialism. In a true socialist system, you don't become a superstar by criticizing it. The system criticizes you instead, and then you quietly disappear.
This election is taking place when we have an administration in Washington which every day is moving us toward an authoritarian society.
This is America, New York City. Don't let them tell you any different. Don't let them tell you that we are the exception. We are the rule. And we set the bar for America. I'm talking to you, Donald Trump.
Let our words ring out so loud tonight that Andrew Cuomo can hear them in his $8,000 a month apartment. New York is not for sale.
And that's the contradiction. Maher is completely worn down by the people shouting that capitalism is broken are the very ones flourishing because of it. Now, none of this means capitalism is perfect. Maher admits it's messy, uneven, and often maddening, but stacked against socialism with its near-perfect record of failure, capitalism starts to look like the stable partner in a toxic relationship. You know the TikTok analogy? One partner is pure chaos, the other quietly pays the bills. Capitalism is that reliable partner. Socialism is the ex who swears they've changed while still holding a gas can. Then Maher shifts to newly elected Virginia Representative Abigail Spanberger, who warned years ago that if Democrats didn't move back to the center, they'd implode. Her message was blunt. Stop saying socialist. Moderates win elections. Extremes get headlines, not victories. And guess what? She won, not by channeling Che Guevara, but by doing the opposite. Did the party listen? Of course not. They dumped her advice straight into the ideological recycling bin. This is where Maher gets that disappointed dad expression. The Democratic Party isn't being led by its moderates. It's being dragged by its fringes, the loudest, flashiest voices, often more reflective of Twitter than real voters. Pushing candidates with radical agendas isn't leadership, he argues. It's political Russian roulette, except instead of one bullet in the chamber, there are four.
Now, Mendami seems like a nice guy, and I congratulate him on an extraordinary political achievement. But before the whole left side of the country catches socialism fever, let's listen to the other big winner in last Tuesday's election, Virginia Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger, who, before the 24 election, said things like, if the party didn't shift to the center, we will get torn apart. And we need to never use the word socialist or socialism ever again. Well, she was right, but they didn't listen. Typical, am I right, lady?
And the silence from the moderate majority is deafening. That silence isn't neutral, it's permission. When a party refuses to rein in its extremes, those extremes don't just influence the party, they become the party. Meanwhile, the data is screaming from every direction. In 2024, 13 Democrats won in districts Trump carried. Every single one was a moderate, not one Democratic socialist among them. Think tanks combed through the results and landed on the same conclusion across the board: move to the center. Even the New York Times, the cathedral of liberal thought, admitted the partisans were wrong and the middle path was the winning strategy. But did the DNC adjust course? Of course not. They treated that advice like a blender, tossed it in, and chugged a chaos smoothie. Moderates are sidelined while socialist messaging gets amplified. The party isn't just drifting away from capitalism. It's quietly flirting with socialism, sending late-night texts like, hey, you up?
At least the party has a clear choice here, very clear. One wing is saying don't ever use the word socialist again, and one is saying,
I am a democratic socialist.
Clear, huh? So how do we decide who's right? Well, it turns out we don't really have to flip a coin. We have the evidence. In 2024, 13 Democrats won in districts Trump also won, all moderates. This isn't rocket science. All the left-leaning think tanks have done autopsies on 2024, and they all came up with the same message: move to the center.
Maher warns that putting ideology ahead of electability is a guaranteed way to lose elections. He points out that the DNC's biggest wipeouts came when they went all in on woke theatrics, symbolic crusades, and fringe priorities.
Even the New York Times, which did so much to promote woke politics, now says the partisans are wrong. Moving to the center is the way to win. And Democrats should recognize the party moved too far left on social issues after Obama left office.
Voters aren't looking for a political TikTok performance. They want competence, balance, and the feeling that the party isn't being run by people who think Twitter is real life. And Maher is right. Americans on the left, right, and center aren't begging for a revolution. They want stability. They don't want socialism. They want solutions. Yet the DNC keeps acting like the friend who ignored every red flag and still asks, why do I keep dating toxic people? Maher lands one final heavy blow. Socialism doesn't just fail. It fails spectacularly. It doesn't fade out quietly. It crashes hard. History is packed with these experiments, and the pattern never changes. Shortages, runaway inflation, economic collapse, mass exodus. Venezuela is the latest case study. 8 million people, roughly the population of New York City, simply left. So when AOC argues New York is the rule, not the exception, Maher flips the script. If that's true, then buckle up. If socialism is the rule, the result won't be prosperity. It'll be collapse. Then he circles back to Bernie's Vermont experiment, because it's impossible to ignore. On paper, single-payer healthcare sounds amazing. In speeches, it feels inspiring. In reality, it fell apart like wet cardboard. Costs exploded. The math didn't work. And this was in one of the most liberal states in America, the perfect testing ground for socialist policy. If Vermont couldn't pull it off with every advantage on its side, how exactly is New York? A massive, complicated, expensive metropolis supposed to succeed.
Zoran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar. Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week.
Maher's final message is blunt and unfiltered. Democratic socialism looks amazing in theory, like a dating profile packed with airbrushed photos and inspirational quotes. But meet it in real life, and the consequences tell a very different story. And that story almost always ends with the same words: economic crisis. As he wraps up, Maher drives home the point he's been pounding for years. America doesn't want fringe ideology. America wants pragmatism, competence, and common sense. If the DNC hopes to win in 2028, or ever again, it has to stop chasing ideological purity and start appealing to the voters who actually decide elections. But will they, or will they keep ghosting moderates and swiping right on political disaster? Only time will tell. And that brings us to the end of today's commentary. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit like, subscribe to Star Ripple for more deep dives, and drop a comment letting us know where you think the Democratic Party is headed. Is this just a temporary detour into ideological fantasy, or a long-term shift that could cost them everything? Let me know below.